My coworker stole 8 months of my work, and my manager tried to bury the evidence. I never thought a Slack message meant for somebody else would end up blowing up my entire career, but that's exactly what happened. I've been a copywriter for almost 7 years, the last 4 at a mid-sized marketing agency I'll call Fieldstone Creative. We're not huge, maybe 60 employees, but we handle some decent-sized clients, mostly outdoor gear and lifestyle brands. My job is basically to come up with campaign concepts, write the copy, and make companies sound like actual humans instead of press releases. I'm good at it. I don't say that to brag. I say it because it matters for what comes later. For most of my time there, I worked alongside a woman I'll call Dana. We started around the same time, both hired as mid-level copywriters, and for the first couple years we got along great. We'd grab lunch together, vent about difficult clients, cover each other's projects when someone was out sick. She's one of those people who's instantly likable in a room, great at small talk, great at reading a client's mood, always the one cracking a joke right when a meeting got tense. I liked her. I still don't know if that makes everything that happened worse, or if it's just how these things always go. The thing about Dana, though, and I didn't clock this for a long time, is that she was much better at talking about ideas than actually having them. In brainstorm meetings, she'd riff off whatever I said and somehow end up sounding like the one who came up with it. At the time, I told myself I was being paranoid. Ideas get built on collaboratively. That's just how creative work is, right? Nobody owns a thought. That's what I told myself anyway. The first real red flag came with a rebrand pitch for a hiking boot company. I'd written a full concept doc, tagline options, the works, and sent it to Dana to get her opinion before I brought it to our creative director, a woman named Sandra. 2 days later, Dana walked into Sandra's office and pitched almost the exact same concept, with 2 of my taglines basically untouched. When Sandra loved it and asked whose idea it was, Dana said, "I've been chewing on this one for a while," and just left it at that. She didn't say my name. She didn't say it wasn't hers either. She just let the silence do the work. I brought it up with her afterward, gently, because I still wanted to believe it was an honest mix-up. "Hey, so Sandra loved the boot concept," I said. "I'm glad it landed, right?" "I think it's really strong," Dana said, like we were talking about a shared project. "I mean, it's basically the doc I sent you Tuesday." She laughed, a little too quickly. We were both thinking along the same lines, I guess. Great minds. I let it go. I know how that sounds now, but at the time it felt easier to let it go than to make it a whole thing over one pitch. I told myself I'd just be more careful next time, keep my ideas closer to my chest until I was ready to present them myself. Looking back, that was the moment I should have started paying attention. Instead, it took another 8 months before I actually understood what was happening. Our biggest client that year was an outdoor gear company I'll call Solstice Outdoor, mid-size but growing fast, the kind of account that makes or breaks quarterly numbers at an agency our size. In the spring, they came to us wanting a full campaign relaunch, new tagline, new visual direction, the whole thing, with a pitch deadline that was honestly kind of insane. 2.5 weeks for something that normally takes a month and a half. Dana was the lead on the account. I wasn't officially on the project, but she asked me for help anyway, late one night over Slack. "I'm drowning on Solstice," she wrote. "Any chance you could look at what I have so far? I trust your eye more than anyone else's here." I said sure. That's just who I am. I've always been the person who helps, even when it's not technically my job. Over the next 10 days, I ended up rewriting almost the entire deck. Not editing, rewriting. New tagline, new campaign structure, 3 new headline concepts, a full narrative arc for the brand video script. Dana would send me rough bullet points at 11 at night, and I'd turn them into something presentable by morning, because that's what you do for a work friend under deadline pressure. I didn't think twice about it. I actually felt good about it, like I was being a good teammate. I sat there reading it 3 or 4 times before it fully landed. It wasn't just that she'd taken credit for one campaign. She'd said it outright, in writing, that she was counting on me not pushing back, that she was planning around my silence like it was a resource she could budget. I didn't respond in the thread. I took a screenshot, closed my laptop, and sat in my car in the parking garage for probably 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. I called my best friend Jenna that night, who doesn't work in my industry at all, works in logistics for a completely different company, and just needed someone with zero stake in any of it to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. "She said that in writing?" Jenna said. "Like actual words, not implied? Actual words." Okay, that's not a vibe thing anymore. That's a paper trail. I appreciated her saying that, because up until that point, I genuinely wasn't sure if I was being reasonable or just bitter about a promotion I didn't get. My friends were honestly split on what I should do next. Jenna thought I should go straight to HR with the screenshot. Mira, who I told a few days later, thought that was too aggressive too fast, that I should talk to Dana first, give her a chance to own it before I escalated anything. I went back and forth for almost a week. Eventually, I decided to talk to Dana directly, mostly because I still had this stubborn hope that there was some explanation, some context that would make it make sense. I asked her to grab coffee outside the building, somewhere neutral. I showed her the screenshot on my phone. She went quiet for a second, then did something I wasn't expecting. She laughed, this short, uncomfortable laugh, and said, "Okay, that came out way worse than I meant it. You know I don't actually think of you that way." "Then what did you mean?" "I mean, we're a team, right? I build the strategy, you help with execution. That's just how our dynamic works. I didn't mean it like I was using you. You said you needed me kept out of strategy meetings because you're better at the writing side. That's not an insult. insult. That's just knowing people's strengths. I want to be honest. For about a full minute, she almost had me doubting myself again. That's the part one still think about the most. How easily she made a pretty damning sentence sound like a compliment. But then I thought about the boot pitch and the solstice deck and the pattern behind both of them, and I said, I wrote the solstice tagline. I wrote the whole narrative structure for that video script. You told the room you'd been chewing on that idea for a while. Her face changed then, just slightly, and she said, I don't think this is a productive conversation, and left. That was the moment I stopped hoping there was an innocent explanation. I started documenting everything after that, which felt paranoid and a little bit sad, honestly, keeping a running file just to protect myself at a job I used to actually like, but I did it anyway. Google Docs keeps a full version history, every edit, every timestamp, down to the minute, and I went back through every shared doc from the past year and exported the histories that showed my drafts predating Dana's final versions by days or weeks. I saved our Slack exchanges where she'd asked me for help. I saved the original boot pitch doc with its creation date. It took me most of a weekend, and by the end of it I had a folder that laid out pretty clearly a pattern going back almost a year. I still wasn't sure I was going to do anything with it. Then, out of nowhere, I heard from someone I hadn't talked to in over a year. Alicia used to work at Fieldstone before I did, left about 18 months before I started documenting any of this, and I only knew her from a couple of industry events. She messaged me on LinkedIn after apparently hearing through a mutual contact that something was going on with Dana. Her message was short. This might be out of nowhere, but did Dana ever take credit for your work? Because she did it to me for almost a year before I quit, and I never said anything because I didn't think anyone would believe me over her. We got on a call 2 days later. Alicia's story was almost identical to mine. Different campaigns, different clients, same pattern. She'd actually complained to a manager at the time, informally, and been told in so many words that Dana was just really good at pitching and that maybe Alicia should focus on building her own presentation skills instead. She left the company a few months after that conversation. She told me she'd always wondered if she'd overreacted. Hearing her story didn't make me angrier at Dana. Exactly. It made me angrier at the company for having already had a chance to catch this and choosing not to. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to let this quietly become my problem to swallow. I asked my manager Greg for a private meeting the following week. Greg's a decent guy, generally a little conflict avoidant, the kind of manager who's more comfortable praising people than correcting them. I laid it all out for him. The timeline, the screenshot, the version histories, Alicia's account. I watched his face while I talked, and I could tell pretty early on that this wasn't landing the way I'd hoped. This is a lot, he said when I finished. I hear you. I do. But I want you to think about the position this puts everyone in. Dana was just promoted 6 weeks ago. If this comes out now, that's not just a Dana problem, that's a Sandra problem, that's a company problem. People are going to ask how we missed this. I'm not asking you to fire her, I said. I'm asking for the record to be corrected. I want credit for my own work. I understand that. I do. But can we maybe handle this quietly for now? I can talk to Dana informally, make sure she's more careful about attribution going forward. I just don't think we need to blow this up into a whole HR thing. I remember sitting there thinking, this isn't about protecting the company from a mistake. This is about protecting the company from having to admit it made one. That distinction mattered a lot to me in that moment. I told Greg I appreciated his perspective, but that I still wanted to file something formal with HR, because an informal chat clearly hadn't worked the first time, given that Alicia had already tried that exact approach over a year earlier. Greg didn't argue with me, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled. And things did shift after that meeting, subtly at first. I stopped getting looped into interesting projects. My assignments got smaller, more administrative, formatting decks instead of writing them, proofreading instead of concepting. Nobody said it was retaliation. Nobody has to say it out loud for you to feel it. I filed a formal complaint with HR about 10 days after that meeting with Greg. The HR rep, a woman named Denise, was more thorough than I expected, honestly. She asked for everything I had, took it seriously on paper at least, and told me the investigation could take several weeks because they'd need to interview multiple people, including Alicia, even though Alicia no longer worked there. Those weeks were some of the worst of my time at that job. I felt like I was walking around with a secret everyone could sense but nobody would name. Dana was polite to me in the hallway, distant but not cold, like nothing had happened. I had no idea if that meant she didn't know about the complaint yet, or if she knew exactly what was coming and had decided pretending was easier. While all that was quietly grinding forward, Solstice Outdoor came back for their annual renewal pitch, the follow-up campaign to the one Dana had presented 8 months earlier. And this time, because of my smaller workload, I actually ended up back on the account in a support role, mostly proofing copy Dana had drafted for the new push. I noticed almost immediately that some of it wasn't new at all. She'd recycled structural elements from an idea I'd pitched to her privately weeks before, one she'd dismissed at the time time as not quite right for the brand voice. I didn't say anything. I just kept documenting quietly, the way I'd learned to by then. The renewal pitch happened in that same fishbowl conference room, and this time I was actually in the room, sitting off to the side with a laptop, technically there to take notes. Dana was mid-pitch, walking Solstice's marketing director through the new campaign's narrative arc, when he asked a pretty specific question about why they'd structured the story the way they had, referencing a particular strategic choice buried in the middle of the concept. Dana paused. It was brief, maybe 2 seconds, but I saw it, and I think everyone in that room saw it too. She gave a general answer that didn't really address what he'd asked. He pressed a little further, clearly not satisfied, and there was this uncomfortable silence where nobody quite knew what to say. I hadn't planned this. I want to be clear about that, because people have asked me since if it was some kind of setup, and it genuinely wasn't. I just knew the answer, because I'd built that exact structural choice myself, and I said calmly from my seat off to the side, that structure was actually built around your Q3 retail data. We wanted the narrative to mirror the seasonal shift you flagged in the last debrief. I explained the reasoning in maybe 30 seconds, clearly, because I actually understood it. The marketing director nodded, satisfied, and the meeting moved on. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody gasped. But I caught Sandra glancing at me for a beat longer than normal, and I caught Dana not looking at me at all. I'm not going to pretend that one moment fixed anything on its own. What actually changed things was that it happened 3 days after HR had finished their interviews, while everything was still fresh for the people involved, including Sandra, who I later found out had been one of the people Denise interviewed. About 3 weeks after that meeting, HR concluded their investigation. I never got every detail, since a lot of it is confidential, but Denise told me they'd found a documented pattern of misattributed work, corroborated by both my records and Alicia's account, and that action was being taken. Dana wasn't fired, at least not immediately. She was placed on a formal performance improvement plan, moved off the Solstice account entirely, and had her promotion put under review, which I later learned meant she didn't get the raise that was supposed to come with it, at least not on the original timeline. I didn't get her title. I want to be honest about that too, because I know people want a clean ending where I get promoted to her old job and she gets marched out by security, and that's just not what happened. What I did get was a formal correction in the account records crediting me for the original Solstice campaign work, a real conversation with Sandra where she apologized directly and said she wished she'd asked more questions earlier, and a new senior copywriter title with a raise that had apparently been sitting in a budget conversation for months, just never acted on. Dana lasted about 4 more months after the investigation closed. I don't know all the details of why she eventually left. HR obviously didn't loop me in on that, but Mira heard through the grapevine that it wasn't fully her choice. She's at a different agency now, from what I can tell on LinkedIn, doing similar work. I don't wish her badly, honestly, which surprises me a little when I say it out loud. I think she convinced herself somewhere along the way that this was just how you get ahead, that the game was rigged enough that playing it a little dirty was fair. I don't think that makes it okay. I just don't think she's a cartoon villain either. Alicia and I still talk sometimes. She told me hearing that the investigation actually went somewhere gave her a strange kind of closure for something that happened to her over a year before I even knew her name. I still work at Fieldstone. Some days that surprises even me, given everything. But Sandra's been intentional about pulling me into strategy conversations now, actually asking my opinion in meetings instead of just my execution. Greg and I still work together too, and things are civil, though I don't know that I fully trust his instincts the way I used to. I understand why he did what he did. Protecting the company felt like protecting his job, but I haven't forgotten that his first move was to ask me to stay quiet. I still don't know if I handled everything perfectly. Some people I've told this story to think I should have gone to HR the second I saw that first pitch get taken from me, months before any of the bigger stuff happened. Other people think I should have just let it go entirely and quietly started job hunting instead of dragging it out into a whole investigation. My parents, when I told them the short version, mostly just wanted to know why I didn't quit the second I read that Slack message, which I understand, but rent doesn't pause for principal, and I needed the paycheck while I figured out what I actually wanted to do. I think about that Slack message a lot, honestly. The way one autocomplete mistake ended up unraveling something that had been building quietly for almost a year. If it had gone to the right person, I genuinely don't know if I ever would have pieced the whole pattern together, or if I would have spent years assuming I just wasn't as good at this job as I thought I was. I still don't fully know how to feel about any of it, if I'm being honest. Was I wrong to push it as far as I did instead of just quietly moving on?